Ladies and gentlemen, President William Jefferson Clinton, accompanied by Shirley Malcolm and Francis Collins.
Good afternoon. I'm Shirley Malcolm, Director of Education and Human Resources Programs at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and a member of the President's Committee of Advisors on Science and Technology. I want to begin by thanking you, Mr. President, for your leadership and support of research, and for your genuine enthusiasm for the science. Mr. President, you celebrated the Association's 150th birthday with us in Philadelphia. On behalf of AAAS, we welcome you to the first of what we hope will be many visits to our headquarters building. We are pleased that you have chosen this venue to discuss opportunities and challenges that flow from the new genetics. For over 150 years, AAAS has promoted the advancement of science and the service of science to humankind. Our programs have been developed to consider both the science and recognition that the pace of scientific and technological advances often run ahead of policies and laws, that it requires us continually to educate and inform, as well as to support public dialogue about what we value and what we consider to be right, just, and fair. AAAS programs have been in the forefront of considering the consequences of new knowledge and of sharing with the public the opportunities as well as the choices such knowledge places before us as individuals and as a society. I first met Dr. Francis Collins in a AAAS video. Your Genes, Your Choices, a video that we produced to explore the issues raised by the genetic research. He spoke as a physician in his role as director of the Human Genome Institute and as director of the Human Genome Project. Dr. Collins communicated his excitement for the science and its potential to help people, as well as his passion for addressing the ethical, social, and legal implications of this exciting new field. Dr. Collins and his colleagues identified the genes for cystic fibrosis, neurofibromatosis, and Huntington's disease. He is an amazing man not only for his scientific achievement, but for the fact that he manages a federal project that will come in ahead of schedule and under budget. Dr. Collins.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malcolm. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure and a deep honor to be here today to celebrate with you scientific advances in genetics that will improve our quality of life, and at the same time, and just as important, to put into place social policies to prevent the potential misuses of these new and powerful technologies. I would personally like to recognize and thank my colleagues in the Department of Labor, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, and the White House who've worked so hard to prepare for today's signing of an executive order. Rapid advances in the Human Genome Project and the study of human genetics are providing powerful tools for us to understand the instructions in our genetic material. We are daily gaining insights into the mysteries of the human cell, how it works, and why sometimes it doesn't work. Though the Human Genome Project only got underway a decade ago, the free access to the data it produces has already led to a great profusion of discoveries about the genetic basis of a long list of diseases. Initially, these discoveries related to relatively uncommon conditions, but increasingly now the same powerful approaches are uncovering hereditary factors in heart disease, in diabetes, in Parkinson's disease, in bipolar illness, in asthma, and many other common illnesses of our society. These revelations hold within them the promise of a true transformation of medical practice. Quite possibly before the end of the first decade of this new millennium, each of us may be able to learn our individual susceptibilities to common disorders, allowing the design of a program of effective and individualized preventive medicine, focused on lifestyle changes, diet, and medical surveillance to keep us healthy. This will also enable us to spend our precious healthcare resources on maintaining wellness instead of relying on expensive and often imperfect treatments for far advanced disease. These same discoveries about genetics will also lead us to predict who will respond most effectively to a particular drug therapy and who may suffer a side effect and ought to avoid that particular drug. Furthermore, these same remarkable advances will lead us to the next generation of designer drugs, focused in a much more precise way on the molecular basis of illness, giving us a much more powerful set of targeted interventions. But genetic information and genetic technology can also be used in ways that are fundamentally unjust. Genetic information, in fact, can be used as the basis for insidious discrimination. Already, with but a handful of genetic tests in common use, people have lost their jobs, lost their health insurance, and lost their economic well-being because of the misuse of genetic information which they wanted and which should have been beneficial to them. It is estimated that all of us carry dozens of glitches in our DNA. There are no perfect specimens, I'm sorry to report. So establishing principles of fair use of this information is important, not just for an occasional person, but for all of us. An example of the kind of misuse that's already occurring. An individual was screened and learned that he was a carrier of a single misspelled gene for a disease called Gaucher's disease. His carrier status indicates that he might pass this on to his children, but that he would never develop Gaucher's disease himself. He volunteered this information when applying for a job and was subsequently denied the job because of his genetic status, even though it had no bearing whatsoever on his present or future ability to perform a job. Another example, David, who lives in the Midwest, has a strong family history of colon cancer. He wants to do everything he can to increase his odds for a long and healthy life. Luckily, effective screening exists for colon cancer using a procedure called colonoscopy. And yet, to get those medical services, David must disclose his family history in great detail, something he worries about. He is also contemplating a genetic test procedure, which is available today for colon cancer risk in a family such as his. But he's worried about the results. Who will get them? How will they be used? Will he lose his job? Will he lose his health insurance? Already in genetic research studies, we are seeing individuals who opt not to participate in critically needed research because of their fear that this information could fall into the wrong hands and be used to deny them a job or a promotion. As the clinical applications of genetics move out of the research lab and into clinical practice, this problem will only become more acute. As a nation, we have already stated unequivocally in the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act that one's ability to do a job should be judged on just that, the ability to do the job. The challenge, and it is a formidable one, is to nurture scientific exploration, encourage the translation of these new discoveries into life-saving medicines, and to put in place public policies reflective of these core American values that prevent the unjust, unfair, and discriminatory use of genetic information. Mr. President, you got it exactly right in your address in 1997 at Morgan State, where you said, "We have not, and we must not shrink from exploring the frontiers of science. But as we consider how to use the fruits of discovery, we must also never retreat from our commitment to human values, the good of society, and our basic sense of right and wrong," unquote. Mr. President, I know that you and I, like any other two Americans, regardless of ethnic group, are 99.9% genetically identical. It's been wonderful to hear you quote that particular fact in various rather prominent places recently. Even as we speak, scientists are creating a catalog of the common variants in the human family. This catalog holds tremendous promise for understanding disease, and with intelligence and ingenuity and hard work, being able to develop new treatments to combat disease. To put in place today a policy to ensure these differences are not used as a basis for insidious discrimination is historic and visionary. Mr. President, time and again, I have been amazed and gratified by your intense interest in science. The sophistication and intelligence that you bring to complex issues in science and technology, and the vision you have for how science and social values can be merged for the betterment of society. Today, genetics brings unprecedented opportunities for medicine. I am pleased and proud that with your forethought and wisdom, we can also practice preventive policy making to put in place the kind of protections that the public needs and deserves before we find ourselves in a needless crisis situation. The author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote, "Your goal is not to foresee the future, it is to enable it." The President's actions today and the legislation, which we hope will soon follow in the United States Congress, will enable the kind of future the American people deserve, where medical advances are available for all without fear of misuse. And now it is a high honor and an exceptional personal privilege to introduce to you a true visionary of the future of healthcare and society, the President of the United States of America, William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And good afternoon. I want to begin by thanking all the people at AAAS for having us here today. My longtime friend, Dr. Shirley Malcolm, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Richard Nicholson. I thank Dr. Francis Collins. What a remarkable statement he made. I was thinking when he said that line that I'm beating to death now, that we're all genetically 99.9% the same, that the 0.1% difference between him and me is all in intellectual capacity for the sciences, regrettably. And that's a great thing for people who care about the future of the human genome. I'm delighted to be joined here by several members of our administration and by 3 members of Congress, showing that this is a bipartisan issue. It's an American issue. I thank Representative Louise Slaughter from New York, who was with me yesterday talking to me about this, and Representative Fred Upton from Michigan, and Representative and Dr. Greg Gansky from Iowa. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you very much and your concern for this. I thank, again, all the people in the administration who worked on this, my science advisor, Dr. Neil Lane, and all the people from OPM and the EEOC and others. This is really a happy day for me. You know, for years in our administration, I was a sort of political front person. And now we got the first election in a quarter century that I can't be a part of. And people are always coming to me saying, oh, this must be a real downer for you, you know, the Vice President and Hillary, they're out there 7 o'clock in the morning hitting all these coffee shops. You must be, how are you dealing with this terrible deprivation? And I went out to Caltech the other day to talk about my science and technology budget, and I said, well, I'm using this opportunity to get in touch with my inner nerd and to really sort of deal with these things that I have repressed all these years, and I'm really, really trying to get into this. We're laughing about this, but you know, it is truly astonishing that we are all privileged enough to be alive at this moment in history and to be, some of us, even a small part of this remarkable explosion in human discovery. to contemplate not only what it might mean for us and our contemporaries in terms of lengthening our lives and improving the quality of them and improving the reach of our understanding of what is going on both within our bodies and in the far reaches of space, but what particularly it will mean for the whole structure of life for our children and grandchildren. And I am profoundly grateful to all of you who have been involved and who will be involved in that march of human advance in any way. That quest for knowledge has defined what the AAAS has done for now more than 150 years. We are here today, as the previous speakers have said, to recognize that this extraordinary march of human understanding imposes on us profound responsibilities to make sure that the age of discovery can continue to reflect our most cherished values. And I want to talk just a little about that in somewhat more detail than Dr. Collins did. First and foremost, we must protect our citizens' privacy, the bulwark of personal liberty, the safeguard of individual creativity. More than 100 years ago now, Justice Brandeis recognized that technological advances would require us to be ever vigilant in protecting what he said was civilization's most valued right, the fundamental right to privacy. New conditions, he said, would often require us to define anew the exact nature and extent of such protection. And indeed, much of the 20th century jurisprudence of the Supreme Court has dealt with that continuing challenge in various contexts. So, once again, Justice Brandeis has proved prophetic for a new century. Today, powerful waves of technological change threaten to erode our sacred walls of privacy in ways we could not have envisioned a generation ago, not just the ways, by the way, we're discussing here today. Will you ever have a private telephone conversation on a cell phone again? Can you even go in your own home and know that your conversation is private if you become important enough for people to put devices on your walls? What is the nature of privacy in the 21st century, and how can we continue to protect it? But clearly, people's medical records, their financial records, and their genetic records are among the most important things that we have to protect. Last year, we proposed rules to protect the sanctity of medical records. We'll finalize them this year. Soon, I will send legislation to complete the job we've started in protecting citizens' financial records. Today, we move forward to try to make sure we do what we can to protect in an important way genetic privacy. Clearly, there is no more exciting frontier in modern scientific research than genome research. Dr. Collins did a good job of telling us why. And when this Human Genome Project is completed, we can now only barely imagine, I believe, the full implications of what we will learn for the detection, treatment, and prevention of serious diseases. It will transform medical care more profoundly than anything since the discovery of antibiotics and the polio vaccine, I believe far more profoundly than that. But it will also impose upon us new responsibilities, and I would argue only some of which we now know. Only some of which we now know, to ensure that the new discoveries do not pry open the protected doors of privacy. The fear of misuse of private genetic information is already very widespread in our nation. Americans are genuinely worried that their genetic information will not be kept secret, that this information will be used against them. As a result, they're often reluctant to take advantage of new breakthroughs in genetic testing. Making a point I think we cannot make too often. If we do not protect the right to privacy, we may actually impede the reach of these breakthroughs in the lives of ordinary people, which would be a profound tragedy. A Pennsylvania study, for example, showed that nearly a third of women at high risk for inherited forms of breast cancer refused to be tested to determine whether they carry either of the two known breast cancer genes because they feared discrimination based on the result. That is simply wrong. We must not allow advances in genetics to become the basis of discrimination against any individual or any group. We must never allow these discoveries to change the basic belief upon which our government, our society, our system of ethics is founded, that all of us are created equal, entitled to equal treatment under the law. The executive order I will sign in just a couple of minutes will be the first executive order of the 21st century to help meet this great 21st century challenge. It prohibits the federal government and its agencies from using genetic testing in any employment decision. It prevents federal employers from requesting or requiring that employees undergo genetic tests of any kind. It strictly forbids employers from using genetic information to classify employees in such a way that deprives them of advancement opportunities, such as promotions or overseas posts. By signing this executive order, my goal is to set an example and pose a challenge for every employer in America, because I believe no employer should ever review your genetic records along with your resume. Because by executive order I can only do so much, we also need congressional action this year. In 1996, the Congress passed and I signed the Kassebaum-Kennedy bill, the health insurance portability law, which made it illegal for group health insurers to deny coverage to any individual based on genetic information. That was an important first step, but we must go further. Now I ask Congress to pass the Genetic Non-Discrimination in Health Insurance and Employment Act, introduced in the Senate by Senator Daschle and in the House by Congresswoman Louise Slaughter, who is here with us today. Thank you. Thank you. What this legislation does is to extend the employment protections contained in the executive order that I will sign today to all private sector employees as well, and to ensure that people in all health plans, not just group plans, would have the full confidence that the fruits of genetic research will be used solely to improve their care and never to deny them care. There is something else we should do right away. We must make absolutely sure that we do not allow the race for genetic cures to undermine vital patient protections. Like many Americans, I have been extremely concerned about reports that some families involved in trials of experimental gene therapies have not been fully informed of the risks, and that some scientists have failed to report serious side effects from these trials. I support the recent action by FDA and NIH to enforce reporting and patient safety requirements. Today, I'm asking Secretary Shalala to instruct FDA and NIH to accelerate their review of gene therapy guidelines and regulations. I want to know how we can better ensure that this information about the trials is shared with the public. I want to know whether we need to strengthen requirements on informed consent. If we don't have full confidence in these trials, people won't participate, and then the true promise of genetic medicine will be put on hold. We cannot allow our remarkable progress in genomic research to be undermined by concerns over the privacy of genetic data or the safety of gene therapies. Instead, we must do whatever it takes to address these legitimate concerns. We know if we do, the positive possibilities are absolutely endless. I said this the other day, but I would like to reiterate. I think maybe I am so excited about this because of my age. I was in the generation of children who were the first treated with the polio vaccine. And for those of you who are much younger than me, you can't imagine what it was like for our parents to see that the literal terror in our parents' eyes when we were children, paralyzed with fear that somehow we would be afflicted by what was then called infantile paralysis. And the sense of hope, the eagerness, the sort of nail-biting anticipation when we learned about the Salk vaccine and all of us were lined up to get our shots. Unless you were in our generation, you cannot imagine. And the thought that every other problem that could affect the generation of my grandchildren could be visited with that level of relief and hope and exhilaration by the parents of our children's generation is something that is almost inexpressible. We have to make the most of this. And we know, we have learned from over 200 years of experience as a nation knocking down physical and intellectual frontiers, that we can only spread the benefits of new discoveries when we proceed in a manner that is consistent with our most ancient and cherished values. That is what this day is all about. So to all of you who have contributed to it, I thank you very, very much. Now I would like to ask the members of Congress who are here and the members of the administration who are here who have been involved in this to come up with me, and all I have to do is write my name. That's a pretty good deal. You can write the Human Genome Code, and I'll write my name. And that takes full account of the 0.1% difference in our genetic makeup. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. This is great.